So any which way, I think we were talking about APIs. I remember 5-6 years back, I used to talk about APIs. And I got ambushed in my own organization maybe around 6-7 years back when say, yeah, tech ka banda kya bol raha hai APIs. And now everybody talks about APIs, right? Those were times when we were thinking about mobile banking ka app banna chahiye, good looking app. I think that's where the world was, right? App banayenge. But the world has already moved to APIs. Basically, today, if you think about partnerships and you think about doing any business, if you don't have APIs, you are basically illiterate, right? You are basically illiterate. Nobody can connect with you. And while we think from both sides, saying banks think that fintechs reach out to them when they are in need. Actually, there's an evaluation parameter which exists in the market where people know that out of those, 29 private banks or whatever number of private banks and NBFCs, only 10 of them are API literate, who have some APIs. And I think those who have APIs also not that scalable, where they can improve upon, right? But I think fact of the matter is all partnerships land in few doors, including in Yes Bank. The reason is that they are API centric, which is tech, but business is also API centric, right? Basically, APIs is about figuring out business rather than just technology, right? So while tech guys may have developed it, it's important that business guys would have sort of supported it and sort of taken to market. Just imagine your sales team does not know how to talk about APIs. I don't know what they'll sell and how will they sell, and I don't know what they need support, right? Bignira, I mean, a lot of banks have APIs. Just to tell you that every bank went ahead and bought one of these platforms, I'll not name which platform, and they spent 4 crores on that. But if you see, they have not been able to take it to market because knowledge nahi hai, right? Business wale ko pata hi nahi ki APIs mein kya hota hai. So I think this is still we are suffering from as such. But with that being the context, let's figure out, we have eminent panel here and all come from a different background. I think we can start, Anita Madam, with you. If you could just take a few minutes, talk about, one, obviously introduce yourself and talk about exactly in your role, what you do want to do with APIs and partnerships, ka kya role hai, kaisa hai, some ideas about it.
Thank you, Sameer. So, very happy to be here. I'm the CEO of Yes Bank. And one of the things that I think Yes Bank did very early was to understand the impact that APIs could have and built up quite a bit, much ahead of when it was required. So I think that is, if you're sure about what will work in the future, it's good to put the investment up front, and that's what Yes did. We have today probably in excess of 1,000 APIs, and can be made based on the use case that our partners require of us. The point that was just made, I think, is very valid. Finally, in my view, technology is something that one can do, some little slow, some little fast. But unless your teams know how to actually use that while marketing or selling to a customer, you're just sitting with a lot of money down the drain because you've already spent money building up these APIs. If I have to take just one small thing, in 2011, Yes Bank started up Yes Money. Basically, it was a co-creation with our banking correspondent partners. So, the ones who are trying servicing upcountry locations. And initially, of course, it was a sort of a portal. And the minute we figured out that we can do it better, safer, and more scalable with the use of APIs, we moved out of the earlier portal technology into using of APIs. Today, over 1 million BC partners use this platform, and thanks to this, we've been able to keep our, about 18% of the domestic money transfers in India get routed through this. About 12 to 13% of Aadhaar-enabled payments get routed through this. So for a bank that is probably just the 6th largest bank in the country today, we have extremely different market share when it comes to certain types of payments, especially because we've been able to think of using APIs much ahead.
Thank you. And Madhu, you have been in this business for all through, right? M2P has been famous for it. So maybe your context and your thought process on partnerships. And I know that when you go to some banks, they say, or they go and talk to M2P guys, right? So would want to hear a bit from your side.
Thank you, Sameer. You've been kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely vouch to what Anita just pointed out. One of our first banking partner, and they continue to be, is bank. This is back in 2014-15, right? So no doubt about the fact that they've had like a significant, jump start in terms of API banking and how you can solve for it. But I really wanted to set the context in terms of what API means for our business, right? All of us in the room are in financial services. If I just draw an analogy from some other ecosystem, right? If you look at all the apps that we use today, whether it's Swiggy or Ola or Uber, the foundational API is actually Google Maps, right? So if you take out Google Maps from the ecosystem, we may not have any of these products, out here. And Google actually doesn't extract any value or in terms of commercialized, sort of model to take out, right? The reason why I brought that analogy is to sort of really put a framework in terms of how, one should look at API. There is a regulatory supply side, which is banks, NBFCs, who have the license to give out products. And what embedded finance and what API can do is to actually really put that, regulated products in the hands of customers in the most efficient way, right? It could be a distribution journey. It could be the Uber and the Ola equivalent that can come out from a financial services standpoint. But the innovation can happen in the front in any journey that the customer can do, despite keeping all the rules of the game at the regulated entity, right? That's what API is enabling us, enabling today for businesses to do. So therefore, the acceleration that can happen once you adopt an API platform is pretty significant. Something that Madam just alluded to. You will have businesses, from financial performance stand out over a 5-10 year period, where you will have disproportionate share in some of the businesses that have got API, right? Payments, for example, Yes Bank has a significant leap over any other sort of bank, and more banks will sort of adopt. There might be time with respect to they adopting it. But this is not going away. This is a new norm and a new reality that we all have to sort of work towards.
Thank you. And Rajat, you have been on the API side all through, but you have taken a very sort of position on the embedded finance side, which is again led by APIs. So maybe we wanted to quickly give a context on your business model and thought process around that, how APIs can help in business.
Absolutely. So I think the stack of financial products in the financial system is fairly diverse. And for example, payments work very differently from lending, and lending works different from say products on the liability side, etc. Right? What APIs, they play a lot very different roles for different sort of consumers of these APIs. To sort of structure what APIs do for people, or who are trying to understand or build something for the end consumer. First is they help really formalize a contract between the financial institution in no uncertain terms, right? So basically you very crisply understand what you can or cannot do. It's not a free for all. You have to basically adhere to the rules of the game, as Madhu mentioned, and which is essentially on already pre-coded or pre-understood, and you can't just go outside that sandbox. That's one. So that's sort of the protocol. Second, a well-built sort of API infrastructure enables you to try, test, build your sort of financial product, your journeys, etc., and then experiment and take it to market. So it might or might not be very scalable at the start, but you can at least test your hypotheses, etc., very, very quickly. So there are so many sandboxes available, for example, in the BNPL space with us, on the card space with M2P, etc. This helps folks to really conceptualize, test. Right, and then of course, as you bring these products to market and you add all of the bells and whistles in terms of compliance, etc., you have a ready scalable product that you can distribute through multiple channels. Now, this journey is impossible without the contract, the protocol, and the ability to test these digital credit products or digital products. And this is what APIs are enabling. So basically what they're doing is they're democratizing creation and customization of financial services products and giving it to folks who understand their customers the best, right? Which is, the way forward in our view overall. Yeah.
Thank you. Moving to you, I think from a Signzy perspective, I remember meeting you and your brother at one point in time. I will always get confused, okay? Then you were building APIs, and I think we met for IMPS or some KYC. I don't remember, but we met on that day. And I think since then you have transitioned, become bigger and bigger, not just in India, outside. So I think your story has been largely led by APIs, but of course you have built solutions around that. So maybe you want to quickly give a perspective on APIs and how new business models can be created on top.
Yeah, I think all the panelists have maybe taken most of the points. I don't know what this side of the panel will
So let me also input one more question to it, saying that on APIs, how can we do design thinking if you want to attempt that?
Yeah, so I also wanted to maybe to address the room, right? It's a very technical term, API, and I think people have made a case of why you should do it. But I think let me make a case for the other side, which is today you would have invested in some solution, some legacy tech. So API is an easy way to bridge the gap between, let's say, what you have today in terms of technology and where you want to be. You don't have to rebuild your entire stack to look like some other total inspirational company you want to look towards. So API, a simple way to understand API is that you can add boosters, you can add capabilities into what you have today. And that's one of the most powerful parts of API, that you don't have to worry about complete overhaul of technology. And you can add, like, for example, the examples everyone was taking, you can add underwriting capabilities if you're financial services, you can add cross-sell of products, whether they are liability, whether they are assets. And you or your tech doesn't need to really understand what is underlying happening in terms of integration with banks, in terms of, let's say, some AI or facial match or document recognition happening. So in at least my view, that's the most powerful part of API as an enabler for financial transformation.
Thank you. Thank you. Avinash, I think you have been partnering with a lot of players in the market. And of course, APIs we've understood is there, right? But what do you look at in partnership on the bank side? What makes you stick to a bank for a long time? And how do you operate this relationship? A lot of people saying, yaar, kaise kaam karenge, mushkil hoga. How do you operate on long term with partners? So just quick thoughts on the market, yeah.
Sure. So one of our biggest partners is Yes Bank, and we work with Madhu very closely. So I think there is a very clear divide that is emerging in the ecosystem, which is banks, fintechs, TSPs, technology service providers who are API friendly and those who are not, right? I may make a controversial statement here, but to me, the way it is emerging is for fintech partnerships, APIs is what KYC is for a banking customer, right? Over time, you will see that just like if you're wanting to be a customer of a bank, you need to do the KYC. Similarly, if you want to partner with a new age bank, you need to be API friendly, you need to understand APIs, you need to be able to consume APIs, and you need to be able to share APIs. In absence of that, you are going to be kept aside. So that's our experience. And I think if you have really sift through the space, and you can very easily do it, as Samir said it earlier, the pace at which you would grow as a fintech would be multifold faster if you are working with banks and other partners who are API friendly and API understand APIs and are capable of consuming your APIs and exposing their APIs, simply because you don't need to end up building what they have already built. So you're able to leverage what has already been built and what has already been created, versus you trying to either recreate it or do a one by one integrations. Here you're able to do a one is to many. That's what is our experience.
Thank you, Avinash. And Pramey, I think normally companies take at least 3 to 5 years to reach somewhere, right? I think you have reached here in a year's time. So it'll be good to understand you do something unique, right? So maybe how you have built so fast. And you also said that all customers you meet tend to work with you without discussions, right? So it'll be good to understand how you provide those APIs and what values can be created with those.
Right. So ultimately we are talking about data here. And, data has a lot of value.
I think maybe a bit louder, I think.
Ultimately, we are talking about data here, and data has a lot of value. And I think in last few years, what we have seen is everybody understands value of data, and everybody wants to adopt. They want to enhance the journeys, and this is where we come in and try to fulfill the gaps which has not been fulfilled, since very long time. But one important thing that we have encountered is that while we have touched upon a lot of APIs, that's there, ma'am touched upon 1,000 plus APIs. And we all know value of about the APIs as well, but also the ability to, because APIs will keep coming, there will be new APIs that will come. So something that the stack we provide is completely new in the market. So the ability to test, bring in new APIs, to be able to create journeys on top of that, and build solutions which are even better than in the market. That's also very important ability where we banks and financial institutions will have to focus on and say that, hey, these are the new APIs. How can we quickly test them out, go out in the market and keep adding new APIs? Currently, we are essentially touching payroll systems and trying to build connectivity with the financial institutions. Tomorrow there will be ERPs that will happen. Tomorrow there will be online platforms that can get added. There are gig platforms that are there in the market. There are creator economy that is getting developed. So of course there are more and more APIs coming in, and that's where we are into basically to power banks.
Thank you. So moving back, I think APIs can come, right? We can pull data, all of it is okay. But let's say banks get APIs and they have to pull in. How do you work with your, some of the systems are still legacy, we all know that. How do you ingest the data for, let's say, decision making, process, challenges in getting aligned the compliance team for it, for those processes? How do you change the culture? How do you work with bit of antique backend platforms and thought processes?
So actually wrong question to our bank, because we are just a 17-year-old bank, so there's not as much legacy as one would think. But I think once you get the basics right, in terms of saying whatever we do has to be secure, it has to move fast, so that decisioning can be fast. And there's a customer at the other end where you need to complete the transaction, again, securely and with speed. I think then we once that sort of a strategic thought process is there, the rest of the things just flow. And today I think there's enough middlewares or everything that's available that you can put it in an area where the person who needs to take the decision can take the decision and then move the final decision into the core system, if that's the way it needs to be done. I don't think technology is honestly an issue today. I think it's more about the process design, the point that you made about design thinking. Do you design it well with the customer up front, and then ensuring the layers of risk management, the security, especially around a lot of the payments, etc. Once you've got all those thoughts, I think designing the process is probably the easiest part. Designing the technology is the easiest part once you've got the process fixed.
I'll talk to Mahesh about that. Okay, interesting. So I think from a BaaS perspective, I think obviously you're working with a lot of banks and around that. From a value proposition perspective, normally some of the banks will say, I will do direct integration. So what is the value of BaaS for a startup to work with you directly instead of via bank, and why banks will work with you? Just a BaaS story, how it's going to play over a period of time.
Yeah, I think the whole BaaS story, you have always a choice between build versus rent. So some banks, when they are not sure about the business model, how it will evolve, will there be enough traction? Or there could also be customer pressure, right? Where some large customer is coming in and saying, I want this delivery in the next 1 or 2 quarters. The processes, that are there for the right or the wrong reasons may not yield to delivery from a market-facing delivery standpoint. But having said that, there's a lot of value that focused players can bring in. It's more about, do you want to spread yourself into doing everything, or do you want to have a focused approach to solving for some of it? But fundamentally, if you look at how banks are looking at it, most banks are today cruising on a highway with respect to their growth and payment volume and all of that. You're basically taking out the combustion engine and replacing that with a solar-powered car, right? And without stopping the car, you've got to do it. I think the big part is in about figuring out, making sure that you don't cause any harm. And that could be customer experience, that could be how you are running the products and processes, that could be regulatory aspects. So if you put all the dimensions in place, tech is least of the problem that bank would want to take up, right? So if somebody can do a better job of it, let me focus on things I'm being questioned on, is how bankers are thinking today. So therefore, tech to a large extent was procurement-led. Today it's slowly changing to a product-led approach is what I would put.
Okay, Fair, fair, fair. Uh, okay. So moving to another thought process we always carry, and at least that's something which message we keep giving to the market is that the banks will have something like 30% business. Good banks will have 30% business from their branches, 30% from their own digital channels, and around 40% will go from the embedded finance side, which means that any other value chain. And you work very closely from the value chain perspective, Rajat. So on embedded finance, when you work with your clients and you work on both sides, you will be working with the lenders, you will be also working on the other side of the ecosystem. So what does it take to become a embedded finance player? Because you have to teach APIs to other side as well. They may not know, understand process plan, and of course trust factor across board. So how does it work? How does it get rolled out? And how do you train people from, let's say, steel industry or a fuel industry or some other industry about the banking side?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, of course, access to, all of this technology and all of the sort of now literature that is proliferating is sort of really creating a new market, which is essentially non-financial services players really entering into the financial services marketplace as embedded finance sort of players. Now, the thing is, you're absolutely right. The market essentially hasn't really, so the non-financial services guys haven't really learned how financial services really work, under the hood. It just seems super simple when you sort of use, say, net banking or take a loan from like a bank directly. But people don't know under the hood how complex this transaction is. There's a bunch of KYC, there's underwriting, there's really a lot of regulatory and compliance work, etc. Now, whenever we expose these capabilities to non-financial services digital platforms, we do have to educate them a lot, right? And not only on the processes, but also the financial models that sort of are needed, and the work sharing as well, right? Because ultimately these are regulated products that are being fronted on their platform, and they can't misrepresent, misguide, or sort of adversely incentivize certain behavior that is not right, right? And the protocol here is essentially not yet established, I would say, or it's not formalized. But as as ecosystem builders, we do keep a tab on and educate all of these folks. And it's a fairly long process. I would say it takes about 2 or 3 weeks for all of their stakeholders to understand.
2 or 3 weeks, huh?
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks.
It's not too long.
Right. That's how much time it takes us to deliver the message. I'm guessing, it might take a little longer for people to digest and really, implement certain checks and balances. But these are important. And I think what is happening is that a large ecosystem of fintech professionals has sort of come about, and there's a lot of movement between, non-fintechs have hired a bunch of folks who've done fintech, etc. And then, there's a lot of vintage folks now available who have the knowledge, who understand this, and that is helping a lot as well. So that sort of streamlines the conversation a fair bit. And then, our team, of course, has been trying to educate the market, and sort of by writing a bunch of stuff, and hopefully, people do get access to those things. But I think we are there's a lot of way to go to in terms of people developing that expertise such that this business model then eventually becomes large and successful.
Super, super. And you guys write really well. Super stuff.
Thank you.
Moving to you, I think from my perspective is this bankers want to get into fintechs. जो fintech से थक जाते हैं उनको banker वापस बनना भी होता है, right? It's tough, right? At times just so tough. One guy called me that यार मेरे को बहुत हो गया 2 साल में घर ही नहीं गया literally. It's 18 hours of work. It happens sometimes. This is real world, right? So I think I'm not going there. I'm just asking a basic question. What skills are required to work in an API company or a digital company like your fintech like yours? And what do you look and appreciate in the participants from? And yeah, some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think also maybe if I can add myself, a part of it is like, does the bank need to go there? I think Madhu was saying maybe the bank doesn't need to go there. They can keep tech out. But so for the controversial part of the panel, No, I disagree. I think banks have to get the tech part, and I mean today it's not obvious, of course, because they're only competing with fintechs. But imagine in US, Apple now has a BNPL product, which it's running on its own balance sheet. So it's now directly competing with the bank, and they had partnered, of course, with Goldman Sachs to maybe learn most of the lessons there. So banks will now have to directly compete with Apple for this market. And right now, I think while banks may still be okay, this fintech is small, I can partner, I can grow. When the large tech starts competing with you, is when you will be challenged to change your tech. And by the time the battle comes, if you're not ready, of course, what banks are facing in US will happen, that Apple will kind of rule them over. So I slightly disagree to the part that, a mere partnership will make banks succeed. I think, yes, partnerships are needed, but banks do need a roadmap to what part of the tech capability they'll have to build. And of course, it's too small a panel to go into like a very technical detail of what they'll need to build. But there are certain areas where they will need to get enabled to allow partners like M2P, allow other partners to operate. They'll have to also get very good at tracking embedded finance ecosystem, getting data and analytics from that ecosystem so that they can build better financial products. Not just that you're putting something on, let's say, Make My Trip Go IBBO. You're getting enough data back to say, okay, these are the financial products, this is how I target to the right audience. And those pipe building, I think, needs to happen. And I think banks need to invest in getting to that stage, not just worry about regulation and compliance.
Okay, so yeah, fair point. In fact, I always believe that banks should take care of it. It should be a reverse ratio. I think banks should have more guys in tech and then operations, right? When you have the reverse, my view is an ops is a tech's mistake. What ops could not do, somebody has to do it, right? And then that's where the mistakes will happen and we give it mass, right? But that's a different day and we can have a discussion on that separately as well, right? I think this is how the world is and you have a wrong reporting structure at times, right? You see CTO, CIO reporting to CFO, bizarre, right? CIO, CTO reporting to the CEO, again, bizarre. Both incorrect, right? I think they should be reporting to the CEO. And I don't know what the role of CDO will be. I think those are the other controversies. Maybe given that we have covered a fair bit, Avinash, I know it's a random question to you. Given that what's happening on the ecosystem side, and there's also a discussion on how neobanks will play, and you also have a view on that. Okay, less controversial. Maybe don't worry, you don't look at me like that, okay? So your views, because neobanks are largely a layer on top of banks, right? And a full use case there. So how do they operate? How do they get created? And I know some of your team members are also working on it. You are also working on it. So some thoughts on how neobanks operate and how they can create value for the bank.
Sure, so I think...
You looked at me, I changed the question, okay? I know that.
That was not the intent, Samir. I was listening to you intently. No, but thanks for that. I think, look, end of the day, the new banking concept itself is fairly nebulous in India, right? Because the RBI has not come out with directives. Niti Aayog published a paper on how digital banks should look. There's an announcement that the government had done to set up 75 digital banking units, etc. But still the definition of what a neobank would look like in India or a digital bank would look like in India is still nebulous, right? So the way we are looking at it is, and whatever we hear and understand from the regulators and other players is that the push is for a collaborative model, a model where banks act as trust custodians, traditional banks act as, gatekeepers to ensure that there's compliance and there's, all the bells and whistles that RBI keeps asking banks to comply with, that's done properly. Whereas the new banks or digital banks work more on the consumer journeys, the consumer experience, the corporate journeys, right? And I think that's a model that's working well already. There's a lot of work that we are doing in that direction. And there obviously will need to be a little more clarity to come from the regulator, frankly, because today what we are doing is we're trying to second guess as to what's the role exactly that a fintech can play. And you're trying to be a little cautious, so not trying to venture into areas that you think may not be allowed. When the regulator comes in with clarity, I think, and that should happen in the next probably 12 to 18 months, where some sort of direction should come. I think it's be much easier for entities like us to say, okay, this is what a new bank can do, cannot do, and then you pick and choose as to what areas you want to focus on.
Super, super. वो वाला question बाद में, okay? So moving to you, I think we spoke a lot about open banking and how benefits will happen to banks. But Pramey, your perspective, since you are looking at the employees' data and all of that, what are the benefits which customers will get when this kind of collaboration will happen? I think it will be good to understand your perspective on the customer benefits.
Absolutely. So our core thinking is that the employees or these workforce that we are connecting with, they are the consumers as well, right? Essentially, these are the ones that go to different banks, financial institutions and buy products. So, and one common feature is that they have to do a verification every time. They have to do KYC verification. They have to do income verification, employment verification, etc. Now, and one thing is that every time they have to go through, there are different processes. And over the period of time, if we just look at very simple example of income verification, traditionally it used to start with pay slips being requested. Then eventually pay slips become very, very tedious, and the industry started adopting alternate data because there's no direct income information available. So an alternate data, being alternate data, it becomes very complex. Every time you have to solve for accuracy, every time you have to solve for, what is the right number or not, and you play with the accuracy percentages actually. So that's where we thought that we will build connectivity directly where this information is available. And in that process, what happens is the consumer gets a very consistent assessment, right? Now, a bank A won't judge that income of a person is 100 or 200. They will exactly know this person's income is 100 or 150, right? So there will not be a inconsistent assessment that can happen across the board. They will be very, very, they can also leverage upon what the existing platforms where they are present on, they are being verified already, they are working there, etc. So we can leverage the existing things which already the consumer is doing on other platforms, and use those behavioral content, behavioral data, and give a very seamless experience to the customers. And makes it very easy, and they will also get to know that, hey, we are going to get products, right? It's not that we'll be denied just because there is some ABC rule or there's some process that we couldn't follow. A simple example is the emergency fund, right? There are a lot of fintechs that try to provide that. Now, emergency fund, when we spoke to multiple players, it's never an emergency fund. It's effectively a personal loan, and it takes the same amount of 24 hours, 48 hours, and at times 5 days time. So it's just coined differently, but eventually it is never that kind of a product. And this is where we come into play, and we want to ensure that they get a very consistent way of getting that product, and in a very seamless manner with more trusted elements, and without sharing your private information like where do you eat, sleep, etc. Right? When you're giving a bank statement or any other document.
Thank you. Thank you. I think one of the basic aspect of the whole open banking APIs and all of that, whatever innovation we are talking about, is that at the end, किसी को पता नहीं चलेगा कौन क्या करने वाला. Okay? I can tell you that their overlap between a bank, BAS, fintech guys will start emerging more and more. And on top of that so-called valuation, suddenly fintechs have more valuation, so they will change directions. Payment gateways were only payment gateways till they became lenders. Are we talking about trust? Right? So there's an issue, right? Suddenly somebody was processing your payment became a lender also, right? It changes. Over a period of time, people will keep changing direction. The challenge will be later on for the regulator to figure out kisko kya regulate karna hai. Now you have to regulate embedded finance guy, right? Not even a bank, not even a BAS player. You go back and you say, okay, in a steel industry, somebody is doing embedded finance because they are actually doing remittance and payments, and they are doing lending to their employees. Don't they? So it's going to get more and more murky or complicated, and of course, create a lot of value to the customers as well. I don't know why somebody has to go to a bank for a credit. He needs his wherever it is, and I think we all know that better benefits we have got. So I think I know there's just 4 minutes left, so open for a couple of questions from the forum. If there are any, would love to get response from the eminent panelist here. Any questions, guys? अगर जगे हुए और वो लाइट से दिख नहीं रहा कि how many of you are awake, right? So don't know. And some of them are very, very big guys, right? So you can ask for a job also, right? थोड़ा सा दिख सकते हो. Not me, okay, these guys. ये तो पहला वाला पैनल मिला है जिसमें nobody has a question, right? Yeah? Oh, question has come. That is what I'm doing. He was asking me, take 2 questions, 5 minutes. That's what I was doing. I think online, offline में मेरे को फर्क नहीं पड़ा. I think I got.
सर ये प्यार में फंस गया, ये लाइफ में प्यार करता है किसी से, उसमें वो खो गया है वो.
वो API solution नहीं है उसकी वजह से.
Okay, so maybe the question I will ask from a general perspective, somebody who's less than 40s, 35, 40s, and trying to look at next level of maybe progress with some maybe 15 years of experience, what should he be doing going forward? Because the world is going to be changing very fast. So maybe you want to take a quick shot at it, because many of you must be thinking, idhar jaye ki udhar jaye, fintech mein jaye, investor ban jaye, kya ban jaye. Right? So some quick thoughts on that.
So you said earlier that why should there be an ops team, and I completely agree with you. And what it means really is that a lot of the traditional jobs are going to wither away over the next decade or so. I think the most critical part for all of us is to constantly unlearn what we've learned, which got us up till here, and then of course relearn. And I think technology is going to pretty much power everything that we do. So if there's an opportunity that anyone gets to start learning and understanding and move out of what is a good comfort zone, I would say one should.
Okay, any thoughts from anybody else?
So I'll just. So I think one of the things I would say is anybody in whatever age group, right? Make a jump into an area where you think your learning curve is going to be the steepest, right? So if it's joining a fintech, that's great. If it's joining a bank, that's great. But do assess, especially if you're in your 35-40 range, because that's the time that's possibly your last window where you start picking up new skills, and after that it's going to become, executing those skills. So, and I do believe, given a lot of the conversations that I've had and my own experience, that you do learn probably a lot more in an early stage or a growth stage company than a mature organization. So do consider those opportunities or options as you look at the market.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a big issue now. We are in a knowledge economy, like all the founders will agree that the hardest part to hire is not skill, but is sincere and hardworking people. You are ready to give them 6 months to train inside your company as long as they're sincere and hardworking. So I think because of the knowledge economy, the skill gap is no longer a big gap. We are creating more and more tools to make things easy, right? Like I have a no-code platform. So you can drag and drop stuff, right? So everything will become easier and easier, and knowledge economy means that it is your knowledge which will carry the highest value, not your actual skill on the ground. Like the most missing part that I find in hiring today is sincere and hardworking people. So I don't think there's so much doom for people as long as they're sincere and hardworking.
बाकी सिखा दूंगा मैं. Not bad. Yeah. आपने पूछ लिया तो 5 मिनट निकल गया मेरा. Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Man from FinBox. So I just want to ask ma'am or anybody of you. So we've heard I personally have heard 7 different narratives about credit cards. Every one day you see that they are dead. Second day you say that BNPL is killing them. Third day there is co-branded cards and so on and so forth. I just want to know what is the actual what I know there is a lot of credit appetite in this country, but how many cards can we technically are aiming to provide or disburse or sell to this? What is the real market size for cards in India? Is there even a market? Credit cards.
So I think I'll talk about narratives, right? Narratives are always driven by people who have benefits out of it, right? And I'm emotional here, and I'm not giving you an answer which is politically correct. We see VCs talking about why funding will dry, and don't talk in a public, right? Do it your own, your founders, right? Don't make it a public announcement. So challenge is that we have a play, everybody has a play. Somebody is saying that BNP will grow, has a story to sell. So finally, everybody is selling their story. The truth is something else. Truth is also about reading better papers, right? So please, so what you see is more of a news item created just for you, right? From that perspective, you think ये बहुत ही knowledgeable है, जिसने लिखा उसको भी पता नहीं क्या लिखा. So I think my personal take is that look, इंडिया में अगर इतने लोग हैं, सबको कुछ तो उधार चाहिए होगा, राइट? थोड़ा तो चाहिए होगा. हम जैसे लोग जिनको क्रेडिट नहीं चाहिए, वो भी क्रेडिट कार्ड लेते हैं. तो जिनको चाहिए उनको चाहिए होगा. तो आई थिंक इंडिया में इनफ स्पेस इज देयर. इट्स जस्ट दैट BNPL फट गया, so valuation goes down in some Australia or some US. We are impacted. I don't know why we are impacted. I think there's a story playing up, and we are reacting too much to it. I think the real story, I would say, read better stuff. You will find better content, and as you guys also write better, right? So it's okay. Don't worry too much. There's enough space. और दूसरा, ये समर विंटर का कुछ पता नहीं है. We have long journey to do, and most of us are really not impacted by that summer and winter, right? So don't worry.
I'll just quickly add to what Samir said, right? So look at how journeys of products have emerged over time across markets. If credit card was going to die in a market like India, similar things would have happened elsewhere, right? That's not the case. In fact, India is a terribly underpenetrated country in terms of credit, and credit cards are only going to explode. The other thing which you should understand about credit cards, which is different from a normal personal loan or lending product, is that credit card is a marketing emotional angle to it, right? There's a brand prestige associated with which credit card you're using. There's a repeat there. So there's a lot of nuance to a credit card beyond just your lending product. If you take a home loan from XYZ bank, you don't really worry what's the brand. What matters to you is the interest rate. That's not the case with a credit card. A brand also matters. So it's a much more nuanced product. So I think a lot of the people who write about credit cards are possibly not well aware of what are the layers in the product, as Samir said.
वैसे भी कोई एक बंदा लिखता है, उसको 4 लोग कॉपी भर के लिंक्डइन भर देते हैं. Don't worry about it, right? It doesn't matter. I think with this we can close, guys. Thank you.